your attitude towards your own writing change once you won the award? Because this is not going to be the answer you expect.
I don't, did we talk about that?
No, we talked about how, particularly because you won your Oscar so early, you were 26, am I correct?
Right, yeah.
You really thought of yourself as still a beginning writer?
Yeah, for me, it created a lot of pressure. I grew up as part of the alternative culture. Most of my friends, when I decided to make mainstream movies, thought I had sold out. When I was going to film school, I was part of a group that did a documentary on Huey Newton.
Look it up when you get home.
We were a very politicized group, and when I decided to make actual theatrical films, they all thought I'd lost my mind. But, I did win at a young age. I didn't expect to win. I was happy to win, but the real result is to put a lot of pressure on me. I felt like, okay, now I've got to do big movies. I've got to do big, spectacular movies that get a lot of attention, and otherwise I'm regressing. And I spent 2 years writing a huge Western after that, based on a Frank Norris novel, The Octopus. And spent 2 years, and at one point Fred Zinnemann was involved, was attached to it. And then Heaven's Gate came out, and nobody wanted to make a Western. And in a way, that may have been actually a good thing for me, because at that point I went back to saying, what is it that I really want to do? I mean, I did this thing not because I thought it was going to win Academy Awards and make a lot of money. I did it because the Life of the Confidence Man really appealed to me. There was something about them that fascinated me. I just felt compelled to write about them. So I had to get back to thinking about what is it that I really want to do. Just pretend this never happened. Pretend this thing never happened, which is a hard thing to do because, whenever you get introduced and you get introduced to the writer of this thing, blah, blah, blah. But, I had to put that out of my mind and start to think, okay, what is it that I want to do next? And it was a little movie called Cannery Row. I mean, it was just this little John Steinbeck novella that I always loved. And so I started to write that. It took me 4 years to get it made. And people always wondered, well, how come you went like 6 years between this thing and your next movie? And it was basically because rather than taking a lot of big writing jobs and things that I could have done at the time, and actually, I was not very good at cashing in. I'm a terrible businessman. But, I had to get back to doing something that I felt connected to. And, it took me 4 years to get it made, and it was my first directing situation. And the film was not a financial success, but it got me back on the road that I needed to get back on. And so I love this thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it did sort of throw me a curveball, and it took me a while to actually recover from the success.
So apparently the lessons for the evening before we open up to the audience, don't write anything good, and don't win an Oscar. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Feel free to just stand up while calling. I'd like to just stand up while calling you, and then just speak in a loud voice and let us know who the question is for. The question for those who can't hear is, why do you think the screenwriter is undervalued in Hollywood?
Well, one reason is because we keep talking about them being undervalued all the time. I mean, every time you see a screenwriter... Well, I'm telling you the truth. Every time you see any depiction of the screenwriter or anything written about him, it's always the low man on the totem pole. The poor, exploited screenwriter. Nobody pays any attention to him. They don't mention how much money these guys are making, and they are making a fortune, and they get paid whether the picture's made or not. We get to keep the money, whether they make the picture or not. And if the picture's a bomb, nobody calls you and asks you for a refund.
And believe me, I've seen Larry's house. He kept the money.
Yeah, I'm telling you. So, I mean, it's not a bad way to make a living. And and when the director's off in the wintertime in the snow with the cast, and they're freezing their asses off, and standing around garbage cans with fire in it to try and keep from getting frostbite, and the camera's freezing over, The writer's sitting on his ass around the swimming pool dictating his next script, or maybe 3 more scripts that he has done already. And so it's the cleanest, it's the easiest, if you can do it. If you can't do it, it's a terrible job if you can't write. But it's like being an acrobat. If you can't catch the trapeze, you fall on your ass and get killed. That's it. Either you can do it or you can't do it. But if you can do it, it's a great job because we have a great time. We make a lot of dough. Listen, these directors today, they take 3 years to make their next picture. So they get paid a lot of dough, but they're getting a movie every 3 years. A good writer can write 2 or 3 screenplays a year and sell them. So he's making even more money than the director, and he doesn't have to leave his house. He can go get the deal. If he's writing a spec script, he can do it in the south of France. He can do it in Hawaii. He can do it here. He can go to New York to his apartment. He can do whatever he fucking pleases. He's got that right. What's wrong with this? This is a good job. Just learn how to do it, that's all. And you know something? You can't learn how to do it. If you can do it, you can do it. And if you can't, you can't. It's like playing the piano. Everybody can take piano lessons and play the piano. But some people can play the piano when they're 5 years old and they're concert pianists and they have brilliant talent. And that's the difference. Anybody can play the piano if you take lessons. Anybody can write a script, but it ain't going to be any good. So if you've got to find out if you've got the talent. If you've got the talent, it's a great job. If you haven't got the talent, do something else.
It's a bummer, you know. It's definitely a bummer. I don't care so much about the writers. It was pretty tough to watch Last Action Hero in the theater, and everyone had the best of intentions, but it was still pretty damn painful. Just to watch it, it was painful for me to watch. That is one of the worst things, and I actually think there is actually a profession that is in far more dire straits than anything that's going on in Hollywood, and that is the film critic. I mean, there's really almost nobody writing real film criticism anymore. There's very few. I shouldn't say there's no one, because there are probably a couple of people who are doing a very good job of it, but in general, there is a really annoying lack of understanding on the part of people writing about film, where they'll say, this terrible line written by so-and-so, or, this scene brilliantly directed by so-and-so, and you could just tell, other than Todd McCarthy, who clearly understands what he's talking about, it's very rare that I read someone's review where I feel like, that guy pretty much knows what goes on a set. By the way, I worked on Zorro, I think in the middle of David, in a David Ward sandwich. So, right, you wrote before me and after me, and I know Ted and Terry, the guys who wrote on it too. It's pretty complicated to explain. Anthony Hopkins wanted to cut all of his lines. Antonio Banderas wanted to make them all much, much longer. It's really difficult to attribute credit, and what has gotten very frustrating, and it's the worst when you see your name up there, is when you're getting blamed for stuff. For me personally, and then I'll shut up. What's really tough is you work on a giant comic book movie, for example, and you're the guy in there fighting and almost getting fired every day because you're being such a jerk about, no, we're screwing this up, we could make a better movie. And then the movie comes out, and people are like, the ridiculous scene that Zach Penn has written into the script. And I don't blame them, they don't understand how the process works, but what's really frustrating is, as a writer, you really have no defense for that type of thing. So it's actually, ironically, Last Action Hero, it was so obvious that it was being rewritten into the ground. It was such a crazy, hilarious disaster from start to finish. We were parodying Shane Black when we wrote it, and they hired him to rewrite us. It was perfect. Those are the easier ones to take, honestly, because it's just so silly. You're like, okay, nobody's going to blame me for this one. But it is harder when you really put your all into a movie and you see yourself as the writer get raked over the coals and nobody is blamed. The credit and blame is not getting properly apportioned. But I really do attribute that to the lack of, that there's no critics anymore. They're just, capsule reviewers. But I think that's going to change too. I think there's going to be better reviewers, and better writing about film is going to come out of the changes that we're seeing in our culture. Jesus, that was long, sorry.